Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another virtual town hall with Peter Milobar, leadership candidate for the Conservative Party of British Columbia. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Rachel. Thanks for coming back on again.
Of course, my absolute pleasure. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me back. I have big shoes to fill. I am not Pamela Martin tonight, but
Or
I will,
Brennan Day.
or Brennan Day. I will try and be as close to them as possible. But we are here tonight at the 1 month countdown to the announcement of who will win this leadership race in British Columbia. As you may know, Peter currently serves as the MLA for Kamloops Centre. And before entering provincial politics, he served as the mayor of Kamloops, longest serving, correct?
That's correct. 9 years.
Wow, crazy. And that gave him experience at both the municipal and provincial levels, something that shapes how he approaches many of the challenges that we face in British Columbia today. So let's chat about that approach, shall we?
You bet.
Okay, big week, very busy time in the campaign. What have you been up to and how are you feeling?
Very busy. We had obviously the debate or panel. It's been characterized through conversation. It's been a job interview, you name it, on Tuesday with Stu McNish and Vaughn Palmer. And, I thought I held my own in that fairly well and, tried bringing forward some of the differences that I have with some of the other candidates around economic policy or where we stand on various issues or how I would deal with issues, as a premier moving forward. And so I thought it was worthwhile, and hopefully people have been able to catch that or go to the podcast and watch it moving forward. And then just a lot of other meetings and campaigning. And Monday I was in the legislature itself,
Yeah.
question period and some debate in Monday morning, and then a few votes during the week. And in fact, we had an exciting moment on Tuesday where there
We
was a
did.
brief moment where we thought the bells were going to ring in Victoria, which meant they were asking if I could be pulled off stage mid-debate to go do a quick online
Oh,
vote,
yes.
and so that would have been interesting if that came to pass. So it's been a busy week, but I've been used to juggling both roles for a little while now, so it's going well.
Yeah, I spent most of that debate watching my phone, waiting for the whip to call me to pull you off that stage. Luckily, we didn't have to. What do you think were the big conversation pieces out of that conversation with the Vancouver Sun?
Yeah, I think two things. How committed are we in terms of, if there's disruption when DRIPA gets repealed? And also, what do we see our view of the economy moving forward? How
Mm,
will we get the private sector economy engaged and back in an investment mode and building jobs? We've had 40,000 job losses in the last 2 months in
yeah.
BC. So how do we actually get people back so they have a paycheck and an actual job? And aren't leaving the province. So I think those were kind of the two areas that were the most interesting.
Okay, so big morning for you this morning. We saw polling from Research Co., which suggests that you are currently leading the other candidates in voter consideration of the 2024 Conservative Party of BC voters. So ahead of all other candidates with those voters. Why do you think that your message is coming across so well to those people?
Yeah, it's been interesting because there was a Main Street poll, an omnibus poll in March
Hmm.
or February that I was ahead in terms of who could win a general election. And then there was one in March as well. And now this one in terms of, within BC Conservative, former BC Conservative voters. And it also showed that since February, I'm net up 14%,
Right.
and the others are up a few percent, but nowhere near the same. So I think it shows a clear steady momentum moving upwards and trending upwards throughout the 3 months, and I guess steady and even keeled would match with my personality, I'd
Yeah,
say. So
that's exactly.
I'll definitely take it. Again, I view polls as snapshots in time. I don't take anything for granted, and it's really about connecting with you, the members out there. Making sure people understand what I stand for, and I think as more and more people hear what I'm standing for and the direction I see for the province, they're starting to gravitate to that message and just how upfront I am and honest about what we need to do and the challenges we face.
Yeah, I think that you've put forward a very compelling narrative that you are the steady hand that we need in this province, and you are somebody that is literally one day sitting in the legislature and the next day on a stage talking about your vision for the party itself. So, in my mind, that is what's attracting people to you. Speaking of the legislature, some interesting news from the NDP today. Not good news, sorry to share with all of you, but we now know that the construction contracts for two healthcare related projects that the NDP told us in the budget in February were going to be repaced are actually now they've been canceled. That's something that you called as the finance critic when you gave your speech in the House in response to the budget. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, so in the budget, I go into the lockup and I have a couple of hours to digest the budget before I have to give our official response. And right away, I saw that on all the major projects, they have completion dates. And there was six long-term care homes, the Burnaby Hospital, and some student residences at UVic
Mm,
that all, instead of having a new year as an end date,
mm,
suddenly had TBC. And so I instantly said that means to be canceled, and the NDP got all offended, and they said, "No, no, they're just repaced. They're repaced. Don't worry." And so today they made it official, and throughout the week they've made it official. But there's a wide range of projects, even in my own city in Kamloops, they've now officially said and canceled a school that for the last 4 years they've insisted a brand new school desperately needed would be funded and has been approved.
my God.
They've done the long-term care, but they've now officially acknowledged the Burnaby Hospital, which is, the speaker, Raj Chauhan's riding.
Hmm.
And so I believe it's his riding. If not, he's in Burnaby. And, I just literally, before I came on this, I happened to be driving through Burnaby. So I stopped at the hospital site to shoot a quick little video. And the interesting thing is they still have the big sign up talking about
Really?
this phase two,
Wow.
and it actually says 2030 completion on it. And then today they say canceled, and it's not just a hospital phase two, it's a BC Cancer Center that was supposed to be built for Burnaby at the same time that's been canceled. So pretty critical blow to
Terrible.
Burnaby, and I think it just shows the NDP are canceling projects everywhere in this province, and they're certainly taking the voter of Burnaby for granted, and we'll correct that in the next general election for sure.
They're probably out creating a multi-million dollar sticker to go on there that says canceled to put up tomorrow. For those that have not been with us on a town hall before, I want to dive into a couple of the big issues in this campaign just to give people a sense of where you stand on them. So first, affordability, obviously a huge question right now. British Columbians are feeling squeezed, housing, groceries, energy, gas. What are some of the policies that you would implement to help with that cost of living?
Yeah, I think there's a lot we can do in terms of, taxes that people pay in their daily lives that aren't hundreds of millions of dollars to the treasury, but would actually
Mm,
let people know that they can kind of afford things that they need just to operate their daily lives.
yep,
So, we need to reset. The so-called luxury tax for vehicles. I say so-called because it hasn't been adjusted forever, and so it's still at $55,000, and we need to move that to 75,000 so that people can buy a mid-trim Ford F-150 or
yeah.
half-ton pickup truck or a mid-trim SUV or minivan, so they can get their kids around safely. They can have a proper work vehicle and not be paying an extra tax that's so, like I say, so-called luxury, even though it's not. We have to look and to get away from the extra PST that the government has put in this budget on a whole wide range of things. We have to look at removing PST on used cars under $20,000.
Yep.
I've long advocated and brought bills forward in the legislature for that, so that regular working people can afford an affordable second vehicle, or a student can afford and not have to pay an extra $400 or $500 in tax on a vehicle that's probably been sold once or twice by the time it's under $20,000, has
Wow.
already done its share to the provincial treasury of PST paid, and we can move forward with that. So I think there's a lot we can do, and that actually will be impactful. And you look at the PST on security costs and what that does to grocery stores, and the extra costs that will put on the price of goods, so that
Right.
people that are, again, paying $6 for a jug of milk, or $10 for a pound of ground beef, so that hamburger helper has suddenly become a luxury for a lot of households,
Hmm.
I think is indicative of just how stretched households are, and we need to be mindful of that, and take these real world steps that will help bring those costs down.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Obviously, DRIPA being the next big topic in this race. Just to confirm your record, repeal it? How many times can you say it in one campaign?
Yes, it's amazing. I still get emails from people, but what is your stance on DRIPA? Or if we post something on Facebook or Twitter on some other topic, that the first comment is always, "Well, what are you going to do about DRIPA?" And well, everyone in this race, frankly, has said it 100,000 times. So, yes, repeal it, absolutely.
So, one of the big things that British Columbians are thinking about, and we had some federal news today on a pipeline, potential pipeline with the United States. How would you balance DRIPA and then post DRIPA with resource development in the province?
Yeah, I think we can balance both, and I think it's also partly when you repeal DRIPA, how quickly and respectfully you can get back into rooms with First Nations leaders
Hmm.
to talk about the way forward, to make sure they understand we're not taking away any of their human rights, we're not taking away any of their constitutional rights, that DRIPA is not a constitutional document, it's a provincial piece of legislation,
Yeah.
and that we are still intending to operate on good faith as the Crown, as the government, to make sure that we're still moving forward projects and cooperation, but for all British Columbians, for the benefit of all British Columbians, so that those nations can still see the economic benefits that they need, but also the rest of the province can actually derive from those natural resources the benefits we need to be able to provide hospitals and schools and all the services we rely upon.
Okay, one last question about the campaign, then we're going to go to audience questions. How do you unify the party?
Well, it's going to be difficult. I'm not going to lie. But leadership races, I don't get too caught up in the rhetoric of the leadership race
Mm,
because parties all have that, and I understand that. And I'm not offended by the fact that supporters of various candidates are advocating or for lack of a better word, trolling or putting on comments on my Facebook page or on others' candidates' Facebook page. That's part
mm,
of the process,
yeah.
and so I see it for what it is. I think at its core, we do want to defeat the NDP. And I think post leadership, I see people rallying again, especially because I've been very consistent and mean what I'm saying we will need to do and how I intend to conduct myself and what I stand for. And I think as the membership realizes that maybe they didn't vote for me as their first choice, but I'm delivering on and acting the way I
Yeah.
told them I was going to act, they will say, okay, the majority agreed with that direction. I can get behind that. And so that's one step of it. We also
Hmm.
have to work with caucus, and I intend to work with caucus. And fortunately, because I've been there for 18 months, I
Yeah.
have relationships, even with those that are endorsing others. Again, part of the process doesn't phase me in the least.
Hmm.
I'm confident that we'll all rally together and work together, and that they'll get behind my leadership, and we'll put together a strong front against the NDP in the legislature and build up our ridings to be ready for the election. And then we have to actually get to the riding level and the 40 plus thousand members we have and properly engage them post leadership, make sure they feel a part of this party, make sure they feel respected, listened to, and really rebuild a lot of those relationships out there and build that trust back up,
Mm,
because that's the key to electoral success, is having strong riding associations that really do step up in elections and help the candidate, be it an existing MLA or a brand new candidate, to get elected and put in
absolutely.
that time on the doors and on the phones, and so it's critical that we do that. And having watched the erosion of some of those relationships and
Mm,
trust over the last year and a half, I'm very mindful. I've had a front row seat being in caucus watching that happen
of course.
around the province, and so I think that's a priority that we really can't overstate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that integrity that you talk about is something that you've carried through this campaign and something that a lot of your colleagues have talked about as well. So implementing that in terms of leadership of the party is a great way to go. I want to turn, they gave me this fancy new iPad. I didn't have one last time I was moderating. So we'll see how this goes with my technological skills. But our first question is from Jaswinder. Peter, why do you think you are the best candidate to be the leader among all the leaders running for the BC Conservative leadership race?
Thanks for that. And I know all four of the other candidates to varying degrees. I
Hmm.
think they're all good people. I know their hearts are all in the right place, and I don't just say that as a cliche. I truly do believe that. But in a case where we have a relatively brand new caucus still, they're only 18 months or so on the job, the vast majority of them. We're going to have to insert in another 15 or 20 brand new. We have a dumpster fire of a provincial economy of $100 billion mess on our hands with record deficits. We do need some stability and we need some steady hand and experience at the helm. And I am the only one that has that relevant, real time experience that has been consistent and kept up with the way things are in the economy and with my views within the finance critic role for the last 4 years to really give me those insights of what's going on.
Mm.
The one thing I will say on this is that I often, I've heard through this whole thing, well, he doesn't really have charisma or he's not
Okay.
lively enough. I mean, we don't need a mime. We don't need a juggler. We don't need an entertainer as a premier. Not in the situation we're in with brand new MLAs and caucus members and that experience.
Mm.
I liken it to I've given this a lot of thought, and we all get our personalities somewhere, and I get probably my business acumen aside from my mom,
Mm.
but my demeanor in terms of being calm and steady, and maybe not looking as panicked as what is actually happening. I think comes from my dad, and he was a
Mm.
physician in Kamloops for 40 some years, and by all accounts, whenever a big trauma would come into the hospital, he was the one when it was all hitting the fan in the emergency room that would calm everyone down and get
Mm.
refocused back in on what needed to be done for the patients or the traumas. And I think that temperament will actually serve us very well given the state that we're in right now, especially with some of the unrest that will come with DRIPA
Mhm.
and things and other changes we're going to have to make as a government. We need somebody at the helm that actually has that temperament to not be flying off the handle, not be over panicking, not be overly aggressive, or like that can be a bit more diplomatic and a bit more even keeled to deal with these big issues that will be coming our way. And I think when I combine all of that together, it puts me in the best position to lead.
Your mom's been watching the race.
She has.
How old is she?
Well, she's old enough, I can probably say, and not get in trouble. So she's 91, soon to be 92. So she's still very active and very politically engaged. And so according to my mom, I won the debate. So there you go. I'm the speaker.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure all the candidates got a lot of mom calls
Yeah.
the other night. Okay, Darlene is our next question. Who does Peter stand for federally?
Yeah, I've long supported the federal Conservatives. We've been blessed with great MPs in Kamloops. Kathy McLeod and myself. She was the MP while I was the mayor for the whole time. We had a great working relationship. Frank Caputo and Mel Arnold, the MPs in Kamloops right now, have both endorsed me, and I fully support them. I almost ran for the federal Conservatives in 2006, I believe it was,
Hmm.
when I was still a city councillor. I was prepared to go and seek the nomination and test it out and see if I could be successful to get the nomination when Betty Hinton had announced she would retire. But I realized with my young family, the travel to Ottawa was not really what I ultimately wanted to do. Kamloops to Ottawa
Hmm.
was not an easy flight, and so I stayed around. I wound up being the mayor in 2008 instead, and that afforded me the opportunity to still own and run my own business while still being able to coach my kids in hockey and lacrosse and help with their swimming careers and still be able to do all those family things. So it actually, hindsight being what it is, probably worked out well for me. But yeah, I've always supported the big gotcha moment, I think, in this campaign when people were pulling up old donation records was that I donated 22 years ago now. I couldn't even remember until someone told me.
Wow.
In 2004, I gave $250 to a good friend who we were both on city council at the time, and he was running for the federal Liberals, and
Oh.
so I gave one donation to the federal Liberals in 22 years or 38 years of being an adult, and apparently that's the smoking gun that I've always been a core federal liberal. So, but again, I truly don't worry about how people vote federally, and so that's how I have always voted. But
Mhm.
that doesn't mean people that vote federal liberal shouldn't find a place under my leadership provincially
Mhm.
if they share the same concerns provincially that I share. There's different mandates federally and provincially. And so people can vote one way federally and still see themselves in a provincial party in a different way.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't the case, the NDP provincially wouldn't have a bunch of federal liberals that vote for them as well.
Yeah.
So there's always a shifting of, and I would guarantee that even in Alberta, there's people that vote federal liberal that also vote UCP provincially.
Hmm.
And so, I don't think BC is unique to that. I think we've just got a heightened awareness to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even I'm trying to remember who the prime minister was 22 years ago. Was it Chrétien? I can't even remember. Um,
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a Paul Narton or Gretchen. Like I say, he's still a good friend of mine. So,
good.
that's last I checked, that's pe what people should do, right? Is support friends and family in politics as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, Emin is this question is from Emin. Sorry about your name. What is your plan to reduce poverty for persons with disabilities? Current PWD is a whopping $1,000 a month below the BC poverty line. Also, what are your thoughts on MAID?
Yes, thank you for this. And I know, Emin, you've been trying to get this question in for a little while and emailed my office too. So I'm glad we made it through today with it.
Mm,
So twofold. First off, with MAID, I do think there's a time and a place for that option. I watched before MAID. I watched my own father-in-law when I was in my late 20s go through horrific episode with cancer, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And
mm,
so, I do see the relevance and want for it, but I do have significant concerns around the expansion that we're currently seeing and the interpretations, the encouragement for it that we're hearing about.
yeah.
So that side of it, I absolutely have very serious concerns that we need to better address and make sure that we have very strong safeguards for it. But I do think that with appropriate time and place or situation, as someone who's gone through and seen that, and frankly, I know a lot of people that are more conservative, viewed in the more conservative light, that have also had loved ones that have chosen MAID,
Mhm.
and an appropriate, what would be considered the original intent of MAID situation. In terms of PWD. Yes, there's no doubt about it. So, the reality is the NDP have really hammered down on our fiscal situation of flexibility. And I know people's concerns are always that when you hear, we have a couple of my running mates, we're talking about making dramatic cuts across into government. And I can understand why people within the PWD realm and other social agency realms suddenly get a shudder, because when you talk that type of austerity, it typically that's the first place it gets cut. And I want to be clear, that's usually only about 10 or 12% of the overall budget. So it's not really you can make fish where the fish are, as they say.
Mhm.
But I think there are ways that we can, within the existing funding envelope, and this is where, when I talk about targeting efficiencies and targeting ways to streamline, the more efficient, the less bureaucratic, the less administrative we can make the back end of the PWD system and associated ministerial costs, the more money we can transfer from that administrative cost to the people that actually need it, and adjust those rates for people without necessarily having to adjust the budget.
Mm,
And at the same time, we have to seriously look at elevating. I believe right now it's about a $16,000 a year earning cap, and then we start clawing back.
mm,
That's not realistic in this day and age. That to think that somebody with a disability that needs that extra support should be able to live on that differential between 1,100 and $16,000 a year, and really not ever exceed that. It's about $28,000 a year or something like that.
mm.
That's simply not realistic. So I think we could even, and again, a round number off the top of my head, we'd have to really dig in with the ministry staff to come up with a relevant number. But in that 24,000, rough $2,000 a month earning, before you start clawing back, I think would allow people to be closer to that $35,000 a year income if they're able to work
Mm.
and find an employer or someone that's willing to pay them that little bit extra, or have a few extra hours so they can try to have a reasonable standard.
So apologies to everyone listening to my coughing here. I have two young children at home, and we all know what that's like in terms of illness. I'll try not to cough on the candidate here. Carrie said, how do you think you're able to get voters on the island and lower mainlands to vote for the Conservatives? Interior usually goes Conservative.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting question. Big, diverse province. How do you appeal to everyone?
Yeah, and you know, those first two polls I referenced, February and March, where they polled the broad public, showed that I was the only one in this race that would deliver a clear majority of BC Conservative government.
Mm.
Everyone else was an NDP Green coalition government, which has served us oh so well over the last decade. And that was sarcasm in case anyone didn't pick it up on the coughing. Um, but no, in all seriousness, what we need to do is, and I think what's shining through to metro area and the island is that poll was I was the only one picking up seats in Metro Vancouver and on the island, and so of any consequence in terms of numbers. And the one thing I can say is that coming from the interior, I'm from Kamloops, is that you know I do have a certain pragmatism to me and common sense, and I do understand that the urban issues are different than the rural and northern issues. And I think that's starting to shine through. And I think people are actually liking a little bit of interior sensibility
Mhm.
to the equation. We were governed very well as a province with the Bennett WAC and Bill Bennett both being out of Kelowna with the
Mhm.
interior pragmatism, sensibility, and common sense. And I think maybe people in the Lower Mainland are saying, you know what, maybe it's about time. We just didn't have that Vancouver centric perspective. We have a slightly broader perspective of problem solving
Mm.
that will actually provide tangible, real results for us as a population.
Absolutely. And one thing to mention is you have endorsements from MLAs from all regions of the province as well. So, representation of support from amongst your caucus colleagues from every area.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of that.
Hmm.
You know, it's a very big province, and to have, like you say, every geography covered off, and every experience level covered off. People that have long, you know, like Linda Hepner, former Mayor of Surrey,
Hmm.
was one of the first ones to jump on board and say, absolutely, I'm on board with you. And Ian Payton in Delta South, who's also got municipal experience, and Kyle Giddens up in the north, and down into the Kootenays with Pete Davis and Scott McInnes, and Gavin in Kelowna, and Ward, my riding mate in Kamloops. I mean, and then Brennan Day over on the island. And so yeah, it's been heartwarming to see them step forward, and I think that also speaks to me truly and legitimately understanding the concerns from their own regions as to why they're saying. Yeah, we can get behind you, and I think that shines through again into the Lower Mainland and the island.
Absolutely. Our next question is from Micah. With so much of the current deficit spending guaranteed due to agreements with public sector unions, which you've talked about, where do you see the cuts in provincial spending coming from specifically?
Yeah, thanks for this. And this is why, you know, I know both Yuri and Ian took me to task on Tuesday for
Mhm.
saying, well, 4% is not aggressive enough. But frankly, it speaks to Ian not being around government for 15 years, thinking that that's not aggressive enough. And it speaks to Yuri never having been in government. And I
Mm.
can tell you as a former mayor, you know, when you're the head of a government, it's a lot harder to make cuts than one might think. And so I think they were sincere in their own mindset when they said that. But the reality is a much different beast to tackle. A 4% cut is still $4 billion worth of savings we're trying to find.
Mm.
It's significant,
Yeah.
especially with those labor costs and everything is baked in. And so, you know, when you consider that health, education, and debt servicing costs, remember, we can't just pretend the bank doesn't want their payment,
Yeah.
is 70% of the
Unfortunately.
budget. We're down to 30% of the budget that is not somewhat locked in. So it really will be difficult. So it is about finding those efficiencies. It's about making sure that we're not overly managed, that we're finding ways to introduce AI and more modern
Mm.
ways to process work. I mean, the premier himself was talking about 15,000 jobs that need to, you know, be made redundant or phased out.
Mm.
That's about 3% of the workforce of the province.
Wow.
So like that's how many employees they have, first off, which is way too many. But you know, it just speaks to when you start seeing how big those numbers are to get to those percentages. So that's why I say we have
Mm.
to do that. We have to be realistic about this. because we do want our hospitals to maintain services and stay open and actually improve services, and we need our schools to do the same, and all those other provisions that we need out there. So we got to find those efficiencies within every department. Department by department, it's not earth-shattering. Going higher than that, it starts to get pretty painful. But then we actually have to grow our economy. And what I mean by that is, the economists always come in with a growth rate that they project, and that's what you should budget on.
Mm-hmm.
We still need to do that. So this year it's at 1.3% growth.
Hmm.
What we need to do, and what I'd be instructing my ministers to do, is that we need to budget at that, and then they need to go out and figure out how to strip back regulation and find investment and invigorate the economy so that we're exceeding that by 50%. So
Hmm.
instead of 1.3, we'd be at about 2% GDP growth. That extra zero point 0.7 to those at home might not sound like much. It's actually huge to the overall economy, to
Right.
giving us those extra dollars to actually then provide the services and get rid of the deficit and get our debt and deficit under control while still being able to afford capital projects and building hospitals and providing the services. It's going to take multiple years to get this under control. It took David Eby only a few years to 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 get us in the state we're in, but it's going to literally take year after year after year of steady spending discipline and steady growth aggressiveness to actually get things back to a balanced budget.
Yeah, it's a really good way of breaking it down because, yeah, of course, there was pushback the other night on those 3 to 4%. But when you break down those numbers and the sincerity of your message to British Columbians that this is not an overnight solution, where this is going to take us time to get back to a balanced budget, I think British Columbians appreciate that honesty.
Yeah, and again, we lost 40,000 jobs in British Columbia in the last 2 months. Those 40,000 people do not need an income tax cut; they need a job. And we need to actually have our job creators investing back in British Columbia. And so we have to get them competitive with taxes and make sure that the tax structure is such and the regulatory burden is such that they're actually willing to invest and expand and bring in new equipment and actually that creates productivity in the workplace. And
Hmm.
that is ultimately what brings people's wages up so they can stay employed, earn more money, and provide better for their family. And we see a more robust economy while we're still providing the core services people want.
Absolutely. Okay. The next question for Peter is from Peter. Peter, what is your vision for moving forward with reconciliation beyond just the removal of DRIPA? Specifically, what would you offer to the First Nations while maintaining the rights of existing home ownership?
Yes. I've had a long history of working with First Nations communities. So first off, again, full disclosure, yes, my wife and kids are Indigenous. I married my wife in '93. I knew it then. I still know it now. We had 3 kids together. They're all grown, 4 little granddaughters under the age of 4.
Mm.
But I know what my responsibilities are in any role that I've been in, and your responsibility as a premier is for all of British Columbia. And I don't take offense to First Nations negotiating as they should for what they feel is the deal that they want. But the premier also has to be there negotiating on behalf of British Columbians and for all British Columbians. I did that as the mayor of Kamloops. We had mutual agreement deals with the Kamloops around fire services, around sewer agreements, around passes for our recreation centers,
Mm.
various agreements that we negotiated back and forth for fair value. They paid the same or slightly more than residents' accounts were paying for certain services because it was still a better deal for them, fire services or others, than running and operating their own. And it was better for the region, so we only had to run one sewage treatment plant and only have
Mm.
one fire service to do fire inspections and fire response. So there are ways that we can actually work together. We negotiated where our slow pitch facility is in Kamloops. That was about a 6 month negotiation and a sign off, and it was an old provincial jail site that turned into a great recreation center and for ball fields and everything. And the First Nations were on board, and we figured out how to negotiate that with the province quickly
Mm.
and move things forward. So I think you can. My track record is to do it with respect, while still making sure that you're mindful of who it is that you're representing when you're having those discussions, and not being offended that a lead negotiator or a chief on the other side of the table is literally doing the exact same thing for what their people have tasked them with. And as you work through these processes, you find something that's fair. What we do need to do is have better check-ins with the public in terms of some of these transparency pieces that people feel like they've been left out completely until the 11th hour, and then they
Mm-hmm.
had no clue anything was even started discussions, let alone that there's a final deal. And so we have to figure out a way to actually bring more transparency into this without undermining either side's feeling like they've given up negotiating, ability, because we wouldn't negotiate a land deal with a developer in public. So we have to figure out how to have that respectful negotiation while still making sure the public don't feel like it's a done deal every single time and hitting them totally outside.
We were joking before that you've put your position on repealing DRIPA on the table a million times in this campaign. But I think something that people lose sight of is the fact that you actually ran on that in 2024. Uh, Can you talk to us a little bit about that history of like how you came to that decision?
Yeah, it has been a journey. Yes, I voted for DRIPA in 2019. That's no great secret. Opponents bring it forward as if they've stumbled on some secret or whatever. I mean, the reason they can bring it forward and I don't push back on say Caroline's voting record is she's never been elected to anything. So
Mhm.
there is no voting record. I have a voting record. I have a voting record as a city councilor, as a mayor, as an MLA, and I'm not going to try to pretend otherwise. It's all on the public record.
Yeah.
So in that place and time, yes, I voted for DRIPA thinking, as we were contemplating it as a caucus, that it would not result the way it has. As we got to 2021 and the premier brought in the Interpretation Act changes and only gave us 14 minutes of debate before they called us off debate, alarm bells started to ring. Then we got into the Land Act changes that we forcefully pushed back against, myself included. I was at the last town hall, and 2 days later, because we got such a large crowd in Salmon Arm, there was myself, Ellis Ross, Todd Stone, Greg Kylo, and Jackie Taggart at it.
Hmm.
Overfilled. We had to go into two different rooms. 2 days later, the government walked away from the Land Act changes.
Wow.
We pushed back on the HIDA agreement and voted against that. We pushed back on Water Sustainability Act changes, the Heritage Conservation Act changes. So I've been pushing back on all these other areas once we started to realize the true ramifications
Hmm.
of DRIPA. I can't change how I voted then. I can answer that I did,
Hmm.
but I can also point to many, many other times where we said, hold on, this is not at all what it was billed to be.
Right.
We cannot support this. So, that's why I was very comfortable when I talked with John Rustad about joining the BC Conservatives and running when everything kind of blew apart there and then got back together. Um, yeah, some people say when everything came together. I was saying when everything blew apart. So I never know which way to phrase it.
All of the above.
But we very clearly talked about DRIPA and the stance on DRIPA. And John and I sat next to each other for my first 3.5 years in the legislature. So we've always had a very open and an honest relationship and conversation. And he obviously knew my family background with my wife and kids. I knew his as a former Indigenous Relations Minister. So it's not like either of us were speaking in code. We
Right.
we had an honest conversation about what needed to be done with DRIPA then, and we both agreed what needed to be done. And so that's why in 2024 it was no problem agreeing to run with the BC Conservatives because fundamentally their platform was something I agreed with.
Okay, this is an interesting question based on some comments from other candidates today. What do you think of a Western alliance with Alberta and Saskatchewan?
Well, I've always said I don't support separation, and so confederation is not perfect, but it's something that always has to be worked and amended and pushed on and make sure that we're being treated as fairly as humanly possible within a confederation. Look, the three provinces together still would not be a large enough government, subnational government, or new collective of a government when you look at the clout both the United States and China have over Canada as a country as a whole. It would obviously have a little more success because we would then have access to tidewater that Alberta and Saskatchewan would otherwise not have.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a collective of the Western provinces working cohesively, cooperatively, making sure that we're advancing each other's interests, that BC's not the tidewater impediment that EB is currently being, so that Saskatchewan and Albertans can actually Saskatchewanites. Well, I'm not sure.
Saskatchewanese.
So, yeah, so I'm not sure. Can actually prosper as well. I think that's critically important, and we do need to have very strong working relationships and develop that, get it back to what it once was. But I don't, if I haven't actually looked in detail what was proposed other than the quick graphic on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's about banding together to separate from the country, no, I don't agree with that at all. If it's banding together for the economic prosperity for the
Mm-hmm.
benefit of all three of us and ultimately then that national economy, absolutely, we should be doing that. We should be doing that currently, and we should be doing it moving forward.
Okay, this is a bit of a long question, so hold
It's
on.
okay. I've been a bit of a long answer. Sorry. That's the
Okay.
mother I referenced earlier. That's her gene kicking in. So
Well, we've got lots of questions, so we've got to tighten them up here. There are so many dysfunctional policies beyond SOGI and DRIPA. Think of K to 12 curriculum, lack of standardized testing, the university system, civil service bloat, red tape, and so on. In each case, powerful unions and special interest groups will oppose reforms tooth and nail and try to turn the public against them. Can you comment on how you will approach the much broader set of issues that aren't on the public's top 10 list, but risk becoming controversial if you do what's needed? Good question.
yeah, and K to 12 especially. I've been speaking at length about we need to get instructional critical, it's precious hours of instructional hours that we have
Mm-hmm.
actually refocused on the fundamentals. And so I totally agree with that. And I think it's actually probably in the top three or four things we need to actually do, or we're not going to have a very well educated workforce moving
Yep.
forward. And so uh, I'm a big, I've always been a consensus builder my whole life. Being a politician, being a mayor, especially in a city where there's not party politics in Kamloops,
Mm.
being a chair of a regional district of a board of elected board of 26, where I was the only mayor of Kamloops to ever been elected to that position.
Mm.
And they elected me for 5 years, 1 year at a time,
Wow.
while we were cutting costs, while we were downsizing committees, while we were getting efficient. I've always been able to try to bring people together to see the broader um, ultimate goal. And
Mm.
I'm not a Pollyanna on this. I know there's some built-in and entrenched views. I think in their heart of hearts that teachers want to see very strong educational outcomes for our children. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think they would have got into teaching if they didn't.
Of course.
And so I firmly believe that if we can get to a table, much like we need to do on the Indigenous file, if we can get to those tables and have good faith, not politicized grandstanding conversations, but good faith. What is the real target that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we get there? And if the ultimate goal is to raise the quality of learning for our children, what do we need to do within those instructional hours to refocus that to get the outcome we actually want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can refocus those conversations. Look, I public sector unions are here to stay. I am not here to rail against union this or non-union that.
Mm.
It sometimes gets misconstrued by some unions when we talk about removing the collective bargain or not collective bargain, the community benefit agreements. Sorry, CBAs, both of them.
Yeah.
Um, because that's about having open tendering for all contracts. So it doesn't
Mm.
matter what union you belong to or don't belong to. If your union shop can win the government contract and provide that
Right.
contract to the public, great. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And same with the BCTF or the nurses or any of BCGU, any of them. When I was the mayor of Kamloops, we had labor peace with CUPE.
Mm.
We had good working relationships. We had fair contracts. We had efficiencies. We listened to the staff. Grievances dropped. Work safe claims dropped. All sorts of things improved in the workplace. And so that's how I approach this. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, and I've had a long track record of doing that. And again, experience does matter. And I
Absolutely.
have the relevant experience of literally being the front end of needing to be the kind of spokesperson on the political side of situations like this. So
Hmm.
I fully expect after an election it'll be a little bumpy, but I think we can agree behind closed doors when we're talking with teachers about what the end goal is we're truly striving for, and they realize that we have a shared common goal to actually improve educational outcome for children. I firmly believe the teachers would be on board with that and realize we're not there to threaten them. We're not there to downsize them. There's class size anyways. It's really about making sure that parents actually understand what level their kids are at. So
Mhm.
letter grades, yes, I'm a proponent for letter grades. I think that's an important piece of this, and that teachers should be able to provide comment back to parents and to kids how they're truly doing in their classes, not watered down language, so that kids feel like they're doing better than they actually are.
Mhm.
And parents don't understand why their child is suddenly failing when they get to a letter grade as opposed to when they're in elementary school. So I think we're not as far apart as people might think. I think we just need to break down some of those ideological assumptions when we get into those rooms.
Yeah, but I think it's such a good point that just the impact of unions in the province on so many aspects of provincial policy, and the fact that we really do need somebody that understands and has experience with these collective bargains, with these unions, and kind of shaping that roadmap for the province, and
Yes.
which you've done on the municipal scale.
Yeah, again, we're all humans. If I'm kicking a union leader in the shin in the media every single day, especially if you're the premier,
Hmm.
and then you think you're going to go into a closed room and have a great working relationship,
Right.
you're kidding yourself. Because at a certain point, people are going, you know what, I'm done having my shins kicked. I'm going to kick your shins too. And so, if it's about having that big soundbite moment to try to prove a point, we're never going to get anywhere.
Mm.
If it's about being confident in your own abilities and own end goal and understanding what the mandate as a premier or as a cabinet minister is, that this isn't about scoring a political point on NewsHour. This is about getting a better educational outcome for our children,
Hmm.
and we can worry less about the ego side of the equation in the media. I think we'd be better served that way, and I think if unions are seeing that we're operating in good faith that way to actually have a true better outcome,
Hmm.
then we can actually work together and actually figure out a way to find those efficiencies, save costs, still get a better outcome. Right. Again, I truly don't think teachers go to work every day hoping that students have worse outcomes than when they walked into the school that morning.
No, of
So I
course.
think there is some common ground we can start from
Hmm.
and work in a productive way moving forward.
Okay, question from Lindsay. Most healthcare workers and many residents across BC may not be aware that the Health Professionals and Occupations Act, HPOA, also known as Bill 36, came into effect on April 1st, so about a month ago. Can you provide a clear outline on what this legislation entails and explain why amendments may be necessary to better support physician retention in the province?
Yeah, so
Hmm.
Bill 36, again, we'll talk my voting record because, again, I'm the only one in this race with a voting record of any modern history at provincial level.
Hmm.
I was there when Bill 36 got introduced. I voted against Bill 36. Bill 36, I can't speak with certainty on two-thirds of it because we only got through the first third of the
Hmm.
bill in asking questions of government at what we call committee stage. And
Hmm.
then the government brought in bill closure. They said the debate is over, the bill is deemed to be passed.
My gosh.
And we tried later on in a non-binding way to still ask questions of the remaining 400 clauses, and the government refused to let that happen either.
Jeez.
And so it's as simply put, it layers on a lot of exposure to a lot of health professions. We're hearing a lot of concern now. We warned of concerns back when it first got introduced in 2019, I want to say. It's taken that long
Hmm.
to roll out. It might have been
Wow.
2020. Yeah, I think it was 2019 it came in.
Hmm.
Um, and so big problems with it. And we need to recognize that it needs to be unwound.
Mm.
Essentially, it's put a whole lot of government political patronage appointees in charge of a whole lot of professions in the medical field. It's created a lot of concern for psychologists in terms of patient confidentialities,
Mm.
access to records, things like that. So, and so it goes with every health profession, and that's why we're hearing from so many now that it's such a concern.
It's so interesting to hear you speak, though, because you talk about a bill that was tabled in 2019 and passed this year. You were there for the whole thing. You have that historical record of being there and sitting in the legislature and watching a lot of this modern legislation.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. I'm not going to lie. I
Yeah.
mean, even with DRIPA, it doesn't absolve how I voted, but the reality was DRIPA was passing whether we voted for it or not.
Hmm.
The NDP and the Greens had the majority, just as the NDP have the Green or the NDP have the majority right now.
Right.
And that's the key, I think, to this whole race.
Hmm.
We can talk about all of this stuff. We
Yeah.
can we can talk about solutions. We can talk and identify problems. We can have the greatest idea in the world.
Hmm.
If we do not select the leader that can actually win a general election,
Exactly.
we can all do this again after the next general election and be talking about how things are going wrong under the
Uh-huh.
NDP's watch, or we can select a leader. I have a certain name in mind that can
Yeah.
actually win a general election and from that, we could be back doing these types of town halls, talking about the things that have already changed for the good
Hmm.
and things we still need to do or recalibrate or refocus. And I would much prefer to be the problem solver than pointing out the problems. And I think we as a collective of 40 plus thousand BC conservatives
Hmm.
have an incredibly serious responsibility in front of us here between now and May 30th to get serious about this leadership race and realize that we have one shot to do this right, or we will be in political purgatory for a while.
It's not a fun place to be.
No.
Question from Bo. How do you plan to reduce the cost of living in BC? So, this is something we touched upon earlier. We are the highest in Canada, and we have tons of resources that are not getting to the market properly. On top of that, are you going to be standing up to the federal government and not letting them push BC around anymore, like Danielle did for Alberta?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Alberta piece first, and
Mhm.
I've literally said this the whole time through. So, yes, so that's why I say I don't worry how you vote federally, because I'm focused on provincial issues and dealing with Ottawa is a provincial issue and how we deal with them. And so, um, if you believe in that we need to repeal DRIPA and protect private property rights, and you want a thriving private sector economy, as the question would ask and resource development and better grades in school and better healthcare outcomes and better crime and safety numbers. If you want all that and share those priorities provincially, I really don't care how you vote federally because you belong voting with us as BC Conservatives, so we can do those changes provincially. And Danielle Smith is a perfect example. No one will ever say she's not conservative. No one will ever say she doesn't take the government behind the woodshed, the federal government behind the woodshed from time to time, and she's working with the federal Liberal Prime Minister to get a pipeline built.
Mhm.
And it's a pipeline I support. And so, that's what you need to do. You need to push back as a premier and a cabinet and fight and defend BC's interests with Ottawa when appropriate. And you need to work with the federal government when appropriate for BC's interests. And sometimes you need to leverage something to get the other with the federal government. That's also how Confederation works. And I say that regardless of who the prime minister is, because prime ministers have a national mandate.
Mhm.
Premiers have a provincial mandate. And so sometimes we do have to push back out of necessity because what a national mandate might be might not be in our best interest. The health transfer is a good example right now, where they're saying that they're going to reduce it in 2028.
Mhm.
The province should be screaming and yelling, not just issuing one quick little press release during a federal budget update and moving on with their life. That's a significant hit to scarce revenues that we have coming down the barrel at us. And so that's a good time that we should be pushing back and fighting. Ottawa and Ontario came up with an $8 billion infrastructure
Yeah,
program for help the costs of
exactly.
housing for municipalities in terms of servicing pipes and pavement and things like that.
Mhm.
BC was left out of it.
Yeah, where?
That's not good enough. Our premier should have been at the table pounding his fist demanding that BC be included in something like that. And that's how you bring the cost of living down. That's how you bring the cost of housing down. You get infrastructure in place. You get permitting timelines down so that there's not this drag on the economy that adds to the overall cost of projects or supplies or anything like that.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's almost like we're forgotten at that federal table these days. David Eby. Uh, Final question. It's a bit of a big one to end on, but how would you create a plan to help with the drugs mental health crisis that is happening all over the province?
Yes. And it is happening all over the province.
Hmm.
So when I say downtown east side right now, I recognize it's happening everywhere, different scale and scope, but same impact to communities of every size. But downtown east side, yes, we need involuntary care for those that can't care for themselves. And when you have been ravaged by the drugs that are on the streets nowadays that change your physiology, so your spine curvature is to such where you're essentially walking around almost touching your toes all day long because you literally can't physically straighten because you have brain damage from multiple non-fatal overdoses. You have underlying severe mental health challenges as well. We have to recognize these people can no longer care for themselves, but they're still somebody's brother, sister, husband, wife, daughter. And so we need to compassionately care for them in involuntary care around the province, not just at Riverview, but other areas as well.
Hmm.
And then we also have to say, but how about we try to prevent somebody getting to that stage,
Yeah.
right? You
Yep.
don't get hooked on opioids and suddenly be on the downtown east side.
Right.
It's a slow progression, and it's an insidious progression, and we know what the end point is, but we do not have enough voluntary care. My MLA office, the amount of times I have people that phone on behalf of their loved ones begging for us to try to help find them a space, and we
Hmm.
just can't. And they're told 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. Phone at 6:55 every morning and see if a bed opens up. And by 7 o'clock, there's no beds available because, if you didn't happen to get the one time the phone was being answered, it's not good enough.
It's terrible.
We need to prevent it because we know what the end point is. If we don't prevent it when there's still high functioning addicts that are finally recognizing they have a problem and their loved ones are still supporting them and wanting them to get care and help so they can get into recovery and treatment and regain their lives and their families back. We know the end point is the downtown east side and or death.
Hmm.
And it's that should not be an acceptable outcome that we just watch this slow decline happen. So we need to tackle this on both ends.
Okay, well, I feel bad for ending on that point, but maybe let's do a quick message to everyone watching tonight on what your pitch is to them for their vote.
Sure. Again, I've been trying to be very, very honest with people. I have a long history of maybe being to my detriment a little too direct or honest for the political realm. But I have it's easy for people to go and search. That's why I make jokes about, oh, people have, cracked the Hansard code because everything's on the public record with me in my
Hmm.
elected experience, right? Between city councilor, mayor, and as a MLA. And so far, the best people have come up with that are running against me is, not them directly per se, but others. Well, my wife and kids are Indigenous, or I'm not charismatic enough, whatever that means, or I need to be more animated.
Hmm.
That if that's the guiding uh, goalpost right now, after 23 straight years of being elected and in the public eye, if that's their big gotcha moments, then I would suggest I'm probably the right person for the job. And to those watching at home, I have a YouTube channel, Peter Milobar, and go search it out. There's lots of clips of me in question period and bill debates on a wide range of topics and issues. You'll hear what I say. You'll see what my style is, what my demeanor is, and realize that I'm there fighting literally every day on behalf of British Columbians against the NDP. I'll continue to do that. I want to do that, and I think I'll do a good job of that as the leader of the BC Conservatives and ultimately as the Premier on your behalf. But it's in the hands of the 40 plus thousand BC Conservative members right now to make that call. And so I'd ask for their support and hope I'm reasonably confident they'll like what they see if they do a bit of that YouTube searching or Facebook or Twitter searching. All my social medias handles are all Peter Milobar, so it's pretty easy to find.
And people don't always know this, but you also have a great sense of humor. So I'll give you a plug for that.
Okay. I'll take it.
We'll do stand up later.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. Apologies that we didn't get to all of the questions that came in. But if you would like to make Peter the next leader and eventual premier of this province, we do need you to vote. So, for members of the party who are watching, you'll need to complete the online verification process in advance of the vote. That process will begin shortly. You may have already gotten your verification email from the party. If not, you have an email coming from the party with instructions on how to verify your identity. Voting is taking place from May 23rd. Mark your calendar, May 23rd to May 29th, with results announced on May 30th. So best of luck to you, and thank you very much for joining us. Good night.
Good night.